Welcome to Backstage Money, real world finance for musicians. I'm your host, Jason K. Powers, and this is the show where we pull back the curtain on the business and money side of life in music. Every episode, we sit down with working musicians and industry insiders who have been figuring it out in the trenches, so you can learn from the people who are actually making it work. So today's guest is guitarist, author, educator, and pioneer. He co-founded the band Autograph in Los Angeles back in 1983, developed one of the most innovative guitar techniques of his era, and helped drive the band to global recognition with the mega hit and one of my personal favorites, Turn Up the Radio. He toured with other familiar names over the years like Van Halen and Motley Crue, Aerosmith, and Heart, sold over 5 million records, and won Guitar World's Solo of the Year. He ran a music school 10 years, and last year released his memoir, Confessions of a Rock Guitarist, a raw and honest account of the rise and fall, reinvention, and search for meaning beyond the fretboard. Steve Lynch, welcome to Backstage Money.
All right. Thanks for having me, Jason. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you being on. I've kind of watched your story over the years, and it's been a neat journey, I think. And that's why I was like, I want to get you on. I want to tell this story. I think there's so many sides of it. And we always like to start with origin stories. How did you get into music, and how did you get into this and the band? And I mean, walk me through it.
Okay. Well, the first time I really got interested and wanted this to be my life was when I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show back in 1964. And that just completely changed my world. I was only 9 years old. And so I wanted to do that really bad. My dad got me this old beat up acoustic guitar with the strings that high off the fingerboard, so you couldn't even play. But I just wanted to, and I kept trying anyway. And then I got into bass guitar for a couple of years. And then when I was a super Hendrix freak, that was the first album that I owned was Are You Experience, Jimi Hendrix's debut album. And so I just listened to him and I worshiped him. I tried to learn everything from him because I had an electric guitar at that time too, but it was just like, it was non-playable. So anyway, when he died, the day that he died, I traded in my bass guitar for a Fender Stratocaster, and that changed my whole world. And I was 15 then. It was 1970, September 18th, 1970 when he passed away. And that was it. I was just a guitar player, and it's been going on ever since then. So, yeah. So,
did you find it? Was that like your natural? Was it just like, oh, I happen to be good at this, or was it you had to really, really work hard to make that shift? Or was
I had to really work hard at it. I wasn't a natural just learning. I really had to work hard. And my thing was because I'm so dull jointed in both of my hands, I had to learn techniques that would more allow my hands to do what I needed them to do rather than just somebody can just pick it up and build up strength and all that. But I had to hold my hands differently. And so, yeah, it was very hard for me to get good at it. But practice pays off. So,
sure. Well, how did getting your first guitar like that, trading in your bass, getting your guitar lead to all of a sudden down the road, you got a band, you're in LA?
Yeah, I played in bands, a few different bands professionally up in Seattle. And that was when I was 18. So I started playing professionally in 1973 up in Seattle, playing all the clubs up there and everything. And that was when I was 18. And I just continued to do that. And then I had this teacher up in Seattle too, Don Mock, who recently just passed away. Really unfortunate to hear, but he was just an amazing player and he taught me this tremendous stuff. And he got me to go down. I was in Montana touring and I called up to set up more lessons, when I came back in Seattle. And they said, no, he's at some new guitar school down in LA. And so I said, oh my God. And they said, I think it's called the Guitar Institute or something like that. And so I actually called up. I got the number from information and called up directly and was able to get him on the phone. He was in between classes. And I said, Don, what's this all about? And he said, Steve, quit your band, sell your equipment and get your ass down here. And so like 6 weeks later, I was there. I mean, it was that fast. I just finished off some of the gigs. Maybe it was a little bit longer, 2 months, but still it was around in that area. It was really short. And I was there, and that going to the Guitarist Institute completely changed my life because it enabled me to know all of the theory and apply it to my playing. And that was a huge thing because now I understood what classical musicians, what jazz musicians, all these different genres I was able to put it together and understand how it all worked together theory wise. And so that was a huge thing. And up in Seattle is when I first started doing the double handed technique, playing around with that. I saw Harvey Mandel doing it, and there's also some others. There was a local guy named Steve Buffington who was doing some double handed stuff. So I was working on that. And then when I went to the Guitar Institute in 1978, that's when I started really getting into it because I saw this guy, Emmett Chapman, who did a clinic, who played the instrument, the stick. He did this clinic on how you can use both hands on this instrument. And it was amazing. And so he said in the clinic that he actually got started by playing guitar, but he thought, I want to be able to have my hand like on a piano, play the lower register and the bass notes and different chord
Oh,
formations. Then with my right hand, play on another set of strings, another five set of strings, and then play all the melodies and different triads and everything with that hand. And so I thought, God, how interesting. So I asked him after he did his clinic, I said, what did you do on guitar that got you to this point? So I handed him my guitar and he just kind of went, well, you take one pentatonic scale here, this is one position here. And then with this hand, you can go up and you can play another position right here. And so he just went, and I just went, wow, that's it. So, and I was already familiar with the technique. I'd already been playing with for a few years at that point. And so that's when I started writing everything that I was learning from the Guitar Institute, the chords, triads, arpeggios, scales, everything. And I started writing it down two-handed. So that, and then I numbered each lick in a certain order so that everybody could understand. And so by the end of the year, I had written a book on it easily. Actually, I'd written more like 3 books on it because I had all this material written down. And so I got asked to write a book on it. And it was from Tommy Tedesco. He was a famous jazz player in LA that did all session works. Every TV show that you watched during the 60s, that was Tommy Tedesco playing that, and the 70s. And then Howard Roberts, who was a great jazz name. So both of them approached me after I played at the graduation ceremony at GIT, and they said, "Man, that's because I played a couple songs where I played all this stuff two-handed. They had never seen anything quite like it. They asked them, I said, you should write a book, on that. And they said, is that something you considered? I laughed and I said, I've already got like 3 books. And they said,
yeah.
well, meet us tomorrow at this address. It was the publisher's address. So we met at the publisher's home address, and I brought my amp and guitar and I showed him how I had written it out. And I played it for him and he understood it right away because he was a guitar player as well. And he said, wow, okay, sign up. So I did my first book and The Right Touch, and it sold very well. So I was really glad for that. And then
Nice.
I wrote 2 more after that and released them back in, I think, 1987.
Nice.
So,
Nice. I heard a rumor when you were at the Guitar Institute, you got the most likely to succeed award. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I'd say you did all
Yeah.
right. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
yeah.
and Paul Gilbert, and of course, Jennifer Batten, she was in my class, so we would get together and changing ideas and stuff, and she was so into guitar, and she was really getting into that technique herself, and so I showed her a bunch of things and gave her some paperwork to work on. In fact, she took a couple lessons from me after we graduated, and then she just took off and just, wow, playing with Michael Jackson. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, right?
Yeah.
And then going out and playing with Jeff Beck. So it's like equally just as talented. So it's like, wow, man, she landed a couple excellent gigs there. And then she's also had her solo bands and stuff as well.
Mhm.
So she's done extremely well from it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fun. So, how did this transition into the start of Autograph? I was reading up on kind of early on, and it's
Mhm.
true, right, that you landed this opening slot for Van Halen and you had
Uh-huh.
not played a show together
Oh, right. Well,
yet.
what happened? You see, again, like in Seattle, I was playing in a few different bands in LA. In fact,
Wow.
at that point, I was playing with 4 different projects. But we were guys that we, all of us had played in different incarnations of different bands together previously. And so what we did was we just got together on weekends and just jammed and drank beer, and we wrote some songs together, like Turn Up the Radio and stuff. That was like right before we went into the studio to kind of demo. And so with Andy Johns, who's worked with Led Zeppelin and John Lennon, and the list goes on and on and on, the Stones and everything. So anyway, he did the demo for us. Kenny, the drummer, was jogging every morning with David Lee Roth. They'd become friends, and so they were jogging. They were meeting at David Lee Roth's place at 8:30 every morning, and then jogging up and down Sunset Boulevard. And so David asked him. He said, "Well, what are you doing musically now, Kenny?" And Kenny played him a little bit of the Coup, which is the group that he was playing in on A&M Records, and then he played him the demo that we just did. And David, oh my God, I love this. This is really awesome stuff. And then Kenny told him that I was in the band, and David Lee Roth, through word of mouth, had heard about me, different times. And as a guitarist in LA, that was up and coming. And so, anyway, and then Kenny mentioned Randy Rand and Steve Plunkett. And Van Halen used to open for Wolfgang, which Randy and Steve were in. That was their band,
Okay.
Wolfgang. So Van Halen used to open for Wolfgang at these gigs in Hollywood, right? And so anyway, David thought, oh, why don't you guys come and open for us now? That'll be, it's like full circle kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now Van Halen really shot up through the roof. And so he asked us, and then Kenny came back and asked us the next time we got together. He said, "Hey, David just offered us to open up for their 1984 tour." And we were all in different bands recording. Me and the keyboard player were in a band called Holly Penfield on Dreamland Records. Steve Plunkett was in Silver Condor on Columbia Records. And like I said before, Kenny was in a group called The Coup on A&M Records. And Randy was playing with Lita Ford. So we had paid gigs, right? So, but then we thought, hey, what the hell? We've already done this recording and everything. Why don't we go out for a few months? It might be fun. So on our way, driving from LA all the way to Jacksonville, Florida for our first gig, and then we did it. We rented this old Winnebago and it could barely run, it's just, and so we made it and got on stage and kicked ass and had a great time for 4 or 5 months, whatever it was. And then we signed Backstage with RCA at Madison Square Gardens when we played there. And then we played for a couple more months with them. Then RCA said, "Okay, guys, you're out here, you're playing in front of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, basically." And they said, "You're not promoting anything." They said, "You need to come back and record a record. They can go back out on tour with somebody else." So we did that. That's when we went back. It was later in 1984, and we recorded the first album there. Everything just took off.
The rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Did you think, walk me through, we were talking before about kind of how you got to see multiple different eras and the changes in those eras. When you guys started out, we're talking late 70s, right?
Yeah. When we started out, it was basically 83, but when I first moved down to LA, the disco era was still happening. It was still 70s music, right? And so I watched that whole disco thing fade out. And then in the early 80s, the whole hair metal thing came in. And I watched all of that until it started to basically lose its popularity due to the whole grunge movement and 89 and 90. And so I watched those transitions from those different types of music. And I even did a solo record in 95 called Network 23. And I put a lot of work into that album. But, the problem is because my name was attached to it. There's a stigma there. If you're an 80s musician and got popular during that time, the record label didn't want to hear it. They didn't even want to hear it. I had Marco Babineau from Geffen Records. He was shopping it for me. He says, "Steve, as soon as I say your name, they just go, 'No, 80s rock guitar player, no.'" And I thought, I'm not just an 80s rock guitar player.
Right.
I just did this whole album that sounds nothing like 80s and nothing like Autograph. This is a totally different thing. And so all of that just kind of, I'm proud that I did it. And I'm proud that I put all that work into it, because I played some keyboards on it. I did all the beginning drum patterns to show Chris Frazier, who was with Steve Vai, still with Forner now. And so he played on the album and to my drum tracks. And then I played the bass on it, and I wrote and produced, almost all the album as well. So it was a lot of work. So I'm proud of that. But it's just, as far as the consumer goes, it didn't make it commercially. So
Sure.
That's just the sign of the times. Yeah.
Well, and when industries shift like that, and that particular one was pretty sudden, I think.
Yeah. It happened really fast. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me about, you guys are riding the wave up there pretty
Mhm.
good by then, and then this industry shifts. And
Right.
so, since we always talk about kind of the financial side of things here, what kind of were some of the things you maybe learned, even if in hindsight, along the way during that shift? You get signed, you're riding big, and you're making
Mhm.
the money, then the shift happens all of a sudden, and a
Right.
lot of people
Well,
are left stranded.
what happened with me, luckily, I had gone to the Guitar Institute and I'd become quite a good teacher on the books I'd written and instructional videos and everything. And so I was doing clinics. I started doing clinics right at the end of Autograph ended in December of 1989. So it was the end of the 80s period because it was the last month
Yeah.
in the last
Mhm.
year of the 80s. And so I was offered to go out and do these clinics. So I went and taught 325 clinics in 20 different countries, including all the United States except for Maine and Alaska. Those are the only ones I didn't teach in.
Wow.
So I had that income, and that was a good income, but I wanted to go back out and play again, but there was just no money in it. It was just all the grunge thing. That's all the clubs and everything. I mean, everybody just wanted to see that. And
Mhm.
so it was over for all of the bands. It wasn't just us. I mean,
Mhm.
it everybody in the industry that was known for being an 80s band. There was just nothing after that. Just, so I got to watch that. Like I said, I was lucky to be able to go into teaching. But
Mhm.
one thing that people have to realize is that even when you make it and you do have success with radio play, with record sales and all this, that money doesn't last forever. I have when we like co-headlined with Aerosmith because they were just coming back after there was rehab and everything. They both Stephen and Joe Perry were in rehab, and they came back and they had to come back because they were broke. And I'm going, my God, Aerosmith is broke.
Mhm.
Yeah, we haven't got any money, it's gone
Mhm.
because the record sales go down because the record sales only happen usually like the first year after the album comes out. That's where you're going to get 95% of the sales, right?
Mhm.
And then the second year starts really dwindling fast, and third year and all that. So 5 years out, you're pretty much done, and you get less radio play because they're adding other bands, newer bands
Right.
onto it. And so the royalties from radio play starts to diminish as well. And so you've got to have kind of a backup plan, basically. What they did was they came back really hard. They put out that album. I can't remember the name of it in 1985. Was it Pump? Or I can't remember exactly what it was.
Mhm.
But they came back really strong because they had a big name. I mean, Aerosmith was a big name. One of the things that I would say to people is write as much as you possibly can, and never stop doing that. And don't write in one genre. You know what I mean? Be kind of like a Diane Ward. She can write anything, right? And so
Mhm.
that's what you do is you write in all these different genres, and that way you do have other ways that you can sell songs and to different platforms. And but that's the main thing is getting an agent that can shop your tunes and all that. But as a band, you just have to sometimes you have to just move along with the times. Now here's one that really is a great example of that. Now, Guns N' Roses, they were a glam band in LA. Then they saw the grunge thing starting to take off. Their image changed, everything. They kind of went into more of a 70s sounding band rather than an 80s pop band. You know what I mean? It had the more raw production in it, the writing and everything. And so I went, they have the right idea. And then they changed their whole look and everything. And they weren't a glam band anymore. They slid
Mhm.
under the radar because they kind of got wrapped up in the grunge thing. And it was
Yeah.
successful for them. They
Yeah.
weren't labeled a grunge band, but they slipped right under the radar at the right time. And
Right.
because of their songs, again, the songs, that's what made them hugely famous.
Yep. Yep. So did you find well, let me ask this. In that era,
Mhm.
was there anything on the making money side that helped you guys, guided you guys? In other words, what I find today with artists is there's very little guidance on what to do with the money now that I'm making it, other than your
Okay.
stereotype advice. But there's tons of advice out there on how to make money. We were talking about this before, on how
Yeah.
to make money, but there's not a whole lot of options out there or education or anything like that about what do I do with the money now that I make it, besides your stereotypical advice across
Yeah.
the board, you
Well,
know?
that comes down to marketing. And nowadays, you do have that platform with the internet. Now, there's marketing companies also that you can hire for, like, let's say 5 grand. Now, that seems a lot to a band that doesn't have hardly any money. But what you what the amount of people that you reach by a platform like that where they're advertising everywhere, and there's ones that do it specifically for new bands, and I see them popping up on my feed all the time even though I'm not following them. And I thought, God, who's this marketing company,
Yeah,
and so I look at it, there's a few of them that are doing really well, and but they're reaching just a massive audience, and they do their own videos, and a lot of these bands do without the big production thing that anymore of like 250 grand for to put. Nobody has that kind of money. That's what the record companies used to pay for, but then you had to pay them back, of course,
mhm,
and for recording the album. But now people have the ability to record at home, and they have the ability to market it themselves, the product themselves, through the internet, of course. But when you get one of these marketing companies and research it, look for the ones best music marketing company out there, and they do a really good job. It's everywhere, and so people want to check it out. I've clicked onto all of them, and I went, oh God, these guys are really pretty good. I hope they
yeah,
do something. And
yeah,
so, but if you get a band together, just go out and start playing shows, especially in the beginning, or just playing to really limited audiences. So you're not getting as much exposure, not nearly the kind of exposure that if you would, if you were making videos and putting them out there.
mm,
Like I said, you can make videos yourself, just be very clever about it and maybe find somebody that really knows the angles, but work on it. There's how-to videos on there as well. See, when I was doing it way back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, they didn't have any of that at your disposal. So you had to be basically represented by a record label, you know what
mhm,
I mean, in order to get the money to do these things. But nowadays, you have the ability to do pretty much everything yourself and be creative on your own. If you know
right,
somebody that does really good filming or has really good ideas, gotta listen to them. But
mm,
the main thing too is this: is not if you try to do something that looks familiar to somebody else, don't do it. It's what you should do is you've got to come up with your own theme. Like I see a lot of people with these, you can put a music video to anything with AI,
yeah,
any kind of music video, but put your own input into it. And the same thing with recording. You can use AI, but you really want to sound like the band. You can use AI to maybe add some things to it and all that, but be yourselves. That's the thing. And that brings me around to people like the bands like Pink Floyd or Genesis or Led Zeppelin, those were the bands I used to listen to. And especially with Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, they became absolutely huge and they still are. They're still making a ton of money off of all the albums that they sold. But you see, they didn't copy anything that was on the radio at all. When I first heard
right,
Led Zeppelin in 1969, I went, "Oh my god, who are these guys?" It's a totally new song, and the song I heard was "Good Times, Bad Times." That's the first single that was released, but they didn't. They weren't really concentrating on becoming successful that way. These were all respected musicians in England already at the time. They were just, they were very young and everything, 19, 20, 21 years old and doing it. And they created this thing where it was very different from anything that was out there.
yeah,
Same thing with Jimi Hendrix. It was completely different from anything that was going on in 1967.
mhm,
You know what I mean? And then you have Pink Floyd, who came in, with Sid Barrett singing. Everybody loved them because they were so experimental, but it was
mm,
kind of an underground following. But then
yeah,
once Dark Side of the Moon came out, that was a game changer for them.
right,
And what they did was it's basically just a concept album. You know what I mean? The songs flow into one another. The whole thing tells a story. And it was just amazing that they did that. But they were able to do it with their following albums too by following that same formula. And so that brings me to the point of just like write for yourself. You can write outside of your own genre and everything and put your own spin on it. But realistically, a lot of people try to copy other things. Now, it's okay to be influenced by other bands and musicians, but when it comes right down to it, you got to follow your own path. That's why in
yeah,
1978, um, I stopped listening to other guitar players completely. The last guy I listened to was Alan Holdsworth, and he was more, of course, more of a fusion type player. And I just loved his playing. And I thought a lot of his stuff was two-handed when I found out he's just got the stretch of
Big
God,
stretch, yeah.
and he was doing most all of it with just his left hand. I was trying to figure it out two-handed, and I did, but it was really difficult. And anyway, so I stopped listening because I thought, I don't want to sound like somebody else. Now, there's different ingredients that are in my playing. You might hear a little bit of Jeff Beck or Jimmy Page or David Gilmour here and there, but, and Alan Holdsworth, of course. But, by abandoning that, trying to follow somebody else, like there's so many people that just wanted to sound like one person, like especially Eddie Van Halen. Then you had a bunch of Eddie Van Halen clones out there,
Sure.
and that didn't do any good. So, because it was just a giant step sideways,
Yeah.
and that's already been done. So you
Yeah.
can't do
It
that anymore.
it really is finding your own identity,
Yeah,
um, and especially today, I think with the era of social media and
yeah.
viral videos, and, everybody gets caught up in it, but the fact of the matter is that's what's catching a lot of the public. That's a
Oh
piece of the
God,
pie,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's just
yeah, absolutely.
getting those videos out there just so people will see you
Hmm.
and people will catch on, and they're gonna like.
Yeah.
I once heard I was talking to a guy about marketing, for online marketing, and he was talking about how for this kind of environment, yeah, really any kind of social media marketing, but
Hmm.
finding that you be you is what I'm trying to say. You be
Absolutely,
you,
absolutely.
and
That's
people are going to be attracted to certain things, and
that's
people are
right.
not gonna be attracted to certain things. And
Yeah,
so you be you, you'll get your fans that are attracted to you and what you're
yeah,
doing. You don't want the people
yes,
that aren't attracted to you anyway. And so,
right. It's
yeah.
like already been there, done that. So do something
Mhm.
that's yourself, and
Yeah.
even like exploring different things that are outside of your regular realm. Like I used to get into astronomy and I used to get into these conspiracy theories and these spiritual things. And it opened me up as far as writing goes because it made me think completely differently, especially books like by Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson and Friedrich Nietzsche. And these philosophers are really, really deep thinkers. It makes you
Mhm.
look at things from a completely new perspective. And it changed my writing as well. And then going on my nature walks and everything by myself and just like really clearing my head out. And I'd have a little booklet with me and I'd start writing down little ideas for songs and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I wrote lyrics that way and I also wrote music that way as well,
Yeah.
just from my imagination, but I was
Yeah.
inspired. Find things that inspire you, I guess, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm. So on that, let's go back to after Autograph kind of concluded in its primary years, you kind of made some calculated decisions to
Mhm.
move on to new things. And
Right.
but in that same interest, right? I need to do what I need to do and build my life how I
Hmm.
want to build it, right? And
Sure.
you took a route that I thought was neat. You started this, it was called the Federal Way School of Music, right?
Yeah, Federal Way School of Music. Right. I started out. I'd been teaching at another music school slash store for 10 years previous to that, and then they closed down, and I opened up the new school just like literally like a mile away, and so all the teachers came there, and it was very successful for 10 years. But
Yeah.
then Seattle weather didn't agree with me, and I started to get sick lots. So I thought, okay, I'm moving back to Florida. I'd lived in Fort Lauderdale after I left LA in '92 and I
Yeah.
lived there for 5 years. But then I felt great there. After living in Seattle again for 20 years, I just thought I got to get out of here.
Mhm.
Just the weather doesn't agree with me. I was allergic to black mold and all that, and so I moved back down to Florida. But one of the things I guess that I've really thought about. I would love to be out playing again, and that did happen. Randy and I and the drummer originally, decided to put together a different version of Autograph and hire a couple of guys like a singer. And then it ended up being a singer and the drummer because Kenny was unable to do it. There was just
Mhm.
some issues with him where he didn't have transportation. He just he was having drug problems and stuff. And
Mhm.
so unfortunately he was killed. He was shot and killed. And a lot of people don't know that, but it was quite a tragic end. It's really sad. But you get mixed up in those kind of things and that's what happens down the road.
Yeah.
Um But anyway, so we did that, went out and played again, and Randy and I had a gas doing it, and got to connect with a lot of the old fans, and so that was awesome. But and that's really the only. But we only were making money because of the fact that we had an established name and songs on the radio, and we were on MTV, VH1 for years and years, and also in a lot of movies and TV shows. We had songs, and so that's another thing also is you don't have to just write for other musicians. If you have a good publicist, like let's say that you find somebody that's really good at placing songs in movies and you have a catalog of different songs, variation of different things. And it can also be used. I see people's names in different movies that I go, oh my God, I had no idea that they were actually
Yeah.
writing for movies too. And so there's that route. I mean, what you have to do is you kind of have to diversify and look at all the places you could possibly make money. But just yourself going and knocking on people's doors. You have to have an agent, but you have to write a lot. But an agent does have to shop it because they won't pay any attention to any musician themselves that sends anything in. It goes right in the trash.
Mhm.
So
But by
that's
the
one
time
thing you
you
have to
came
consider.
back out, right? This was what, around 2013 or so? Was that
Yeah,
right? When
yeah.
you guys came back out, you released new
Yeah, we
music.
started playing. We rehearsed a few times in 2013, but our first gig was January 2014.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was like the financial reality of that versus back in the day coming back from, you had things going on along the
Mhm.
way, but just to focus on the band side, what was the most notable contrast, I guess, on the financial side from coming back
Well, I
out
would
like
say,
then versus back in the 80s?
yeah. Well, even back in the 80s, we were very conscious of how much money we were spending. We cut a lot of corners. We had a small lighting, system and sound system. But you see, most of the places we played, they all had a sound system, so we didn't need much.
Yep.
I mean, when touring with Van Halen, we used their system. Motley Crue or whoever it might be, they have their own sound system, so we just use theirs, and we use their lighting system as well. But what we did, well, when we were touring with these groups, is let's say like Van Halen, for example, they would play 2 or 3 times a week. Well, we would play for 11 days in a row. All those other days that Van Halen wasn't playing, we went and played with our own setup at different theaters and casinos, at different bars. And so we were making money constantly. You know what I mean? 11
Mhm.
days off, or 11 days on, 1 day off, then back to 11 days on, 1 day off. And so we
Wow.
did that most of our touring career. We always filled in all the open days with other gigs. And so it was much more personal. A lot of people saw us rather than in the arenas. They also saw us on those platforms as well. Yeah,
Mhm.
and so that was another way we had to monetize. But of course, we were making better money back then because of the fact that we sold a lot of albums. But we also had to. We didn't see any money till we went gold because we had to pay back all the stuff that RCA did as far as the recording and the 2 videos that were recorded. All that had to be paid back. So there was
Mhm.
like already probably 500,000 just in that,
Wow.
so we had to pay that back before we saw a penny. And so that's why it's just the best thing to do is not use a recording company, use a distribution company. Just get your songs distributed. You can start your own record label, and that can be just your thing. But a distribution company is the big thing. Like with my book, The Right Confessions of a Rock Guitarist. You see, I'm signed to Indigo River, which is a fairly small publishing company, but they're very well liked and they have a great reputation. I went with them, but they're distributed through Simon and Schuster, which is the biggest in the world
Yep.
distribution company
Right.
and publishing company. So that's why I signed with them because now I have distribution through the biggest distributor, and that's what you want to look for is being able to sign a deal with a distributor, not a record company, just to get your stuff distributed and sold. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty
and
wild.
the other thing is when we started playing again, we didn't bring any amps, any drums, or anything like that. It was all set up for us. There was always a writer as far as the equipment. The only thing I brought was my pedal board and a couple of guitars strapped to my back.
Mhm.
And that's what everybody did it. Randy did the same, and the drummers just brought sticks, basically.
Okay.
And so that's the way we were. That's the way we played.
Yeah.
And but if you have to cart around your own equipment and everything, boy, that gets expensive because if you don't have a van already, you have to rent a van and do all that. And it's a major pain. And then you're out playing on a Tuesday night somewhere in the Midwest. And there's only 4 people in there. And the club owner doesn't want to pay it because he didn't make any money. You know what I mean? So you
Right.
run into all these different snags. I've moved with them all because I went through all that stuff back in the
Well,
70s. The bands I played with up in Seattle. So
yeah.
I've been through all that. But yeah, just the main thing is, first of all, create the music, right? And really be original. Write music from what you feel. A lot of people just try to copy similar something similar to a song that they already know and go down that. But that's not you. You didn't experience that. What did
Yeah.
you experience? Now you listen to the songs like Robert Plant would be talking about different songs he wrote with Led Zeppelin, like on the second album especially. He just said, "Oh, well, we were here, and I just wrote a song about it." Well, what about Penny Lane by the Beatles? Well, there's a street right by where they lived, so they wrote about that. You know what I mean? I mean,
Mhm.
Strawberry Fields, that's the name of a little park that they always used to go to and smoke pot.
Yes.
Okay. So there's all these different influences from different things they experienced personally. And after you get that stuff recorded, after you feel like you've niched your way into your own sound and you are really enthusiastic about it, then you start putting together videos for each one, even if it's a combination of playing live, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
just say getting a stage, but you have to have something that looks big. So maybe you rent like a night, $200 in a theater when it's not being used, you know, like a play theater, not like
Yeah.
a movie theater, of course,
Sure.
and that has a stage already, and get somebody to run the lights and stuff, and put together some live shots and just do it in one day. I mean, we did all our videos in just one day. All the videos we ever did. So one day, like eight, you know, like sometimes audit up to spend as many as 16 hours or one day. We did 2 videos back to back, and each one was 16 hours. So we were super burned
Wow.
out at the end of it, but we
Yeah.
did it. The first 2 videos for Turn Up the Radio and Send Her to Me. We did them back to back over a weekend, Saturday and Sunday.
Wow.
And so I'm saying that's something that they can do and making it as inexpensive as possible. And also doing adding on parts that have virtual reality in there, the AI stuff to make it look really cool. So you have a theme going, but think of a theme. What is the song about, And then put that theme together and put that in with live clips of you playing live, or whatever you want to do with it. Or take some other video of different things and splice them in there. And then the thing is, after that would be to find a marketing agent and really get your stuff out there. You don't need a distribution agent yet. Sometimes these marketing companies will distribute it for you as well, but it's like the marketing agent to get you known off of all these different platforms that they use. You're everywhere. And then concentrate on getting a distribution agent, or you can sometimes get referred to a distribution agency through the marketing agency because they might work together, and that's a big plus. But then what you do is after that, you get it to that point, and then you can start putting together live shows, but you've already got momentum built up. You
Mhm.
see what I mean? But just putting a band together, throwing a name on it, and going out and playing live in clubs, you're just going to get known locally. It's very hard to break beyond that. And that's the really good thing about having the internet today is that you can pretty much do everything yourself and get a lot, or with a marketing agent, distribution agent, and get all these things done without having to go through the whole thing of signing
Right.
with a record label and going into rehearsals, which is expensive and all that. So there's ways to cut corners. Always be aware of that. And then always be aware of different places that you can put your songs, like I said before, like in movies and TV and all that. But there are places that do this for you. A place that really has a lot of contacts for all of this is called Copyright Alliance. And you sign up with that, and they have different places on how to get your songs copywritten and all that. They have direct links to all these different things and all these different companies that you can use. But it's those connections that you find through a really trusted source like that, Copyright Alliance. And if you Google that and go into that, then
Yeah.
you'll see all the different things that they have to offer. That's an incredible way to do it right there.
Yeah.
You get so much more from just having something at your disposal that you can really use to your benefit. So.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's great. I can tell that teaching is a thing of yours, you've liked to teach a lot over the years
Yeah.
between the school and the lessons and even just this conversation. I could tell that's kind of a passion of yours.
Yes,
And
I do like to educate people both. Like when had the school up in Seattle, I would let them know the realities and what like similar to what we're talking about now about the internet, using the internet and all that. But I'll say don't quit your day job quite yet because to make a living off of this, it takes years, like after you're formed, sometimes it'll take 2 or 3 years or longer to actually make a living just off of that. But like I said, number one thing is writing songs. And so that's the most important.
yep. So after, let's see, around 2019, I think you had left the band,
Yeah.
but in part for you, it was the writing on the wall I believe it was a conscious decision a calculated
Yeah.
decision, I should say, to
Right.
say you watched 5 promoters go out of business in 1 year. Uh,
Right. Exactly.
but
And my issues with carpal tunnel were
Mhm.
really bad at that point, to the point where I'd be playing on stage and my hands would be freezing up. And I thought, you know what? The last thing I want to do is go out and not having your hands freeze up on stage, which they did a couple of times. And it was extremely painful. And I had to stop playing and stretch my hands out to get them sort of to uncramp. And I thought, I don't want, and I saw a couple of videos of me playing, and I'm just going, I could tell that I'm struggling really, really hard
Mhm.
just to get through the solo, and my hands are freaking out, and they're going, "No more of this." And so I went to a hand doctor, and he said, "If you keep doing this, in about 5 years, you're going to have a difficult time holding a cup of coffee." Because he said
Uh,
that you've got beginning stages of arthritis and stuff. So he says if you do it, more casually, and he said one of the things that is position when you're standing up and you're playing. Um, then your hands are in a much more vulnerable position than
Mhm.
when you're sitting down and playing because you're much more relaxed. And so sure enough, at that point, like what we were talking about, another one of the reasons is that I thought, I can keep doing this, playing the autograph songs and everything, but then writing some more songs, which I wasn't into it because I was so far out of that realm of the '80s. I didn't want to write for the '80s because that had been over for a few
yeah.
decades, you know what I mean? And so I wanted to write something new. Of course, I did the solo album, and now I have material where I could do that, where I'll do a lot of it with AI, but I'd have real musicians play it on it as well. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like structure the song with AI and all that, so.
Mhm.
So that's what I want to do. Is I just want to carry on, but just do a solo. You never know. I might put together another a version of autograph, but I'd really have to see how well my hands would hold up. Like I'd have to practice the songs and get used to playing them standing up and see what my hands would do.
Mhm.
If they're going to start cramping up again, then obviously I can't do it. So I'm a little bit hesitant, on
Yeah.
doing that at this point.
Well, I think you'd have the support behind you if you
Yeah, right. Yeah,
decided to.
exactly. That's
Oh,
what's really cool is the fans are still there. I mean, it's so cool and everybody wants me to do that, but I also want to do something where it's completely different from anything that I've done. And that's kind of where
yeah.
my mind is right now.
Yeah.
And, spiritually, I'm just in a different place. So I'd want to concentrate more on that. But like I said, you never know. A lot of
Right.
people want to do a band with me. So we'll see what happens in the future.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, so by last year, tell me you came out with this book, Confessions
Uh,
of a Rock Guitarist,
right.
and what kind of led up to that, and what prompted you to write that? And
Well, people, and speaking interviews, like all this crazy stuff that I've gone through and everything, and just sitting around with friends and family and explaining all these different things that I've gone through in my life, and say, God, you got to write a book on this stuff. It's just incredible. So probably about 10, maybe 12 years ago, something like that, I started writing down these one sentence reminders
Mhm.
of like something I've gone through. And so I
Mhm.
started writing these down and they would just pop into my head all the time. And so then I started remembering more and more and more. And then I put them all in chronological order. Then when COVID hit, I couldn't tour. and couldn't teach, couldn't really do much of anything. And so what I did was I started writing the book, started putting it in order and writing and writing and writing. So after a couple of years, by the time COVID ended, my book was done too. At least the first edition. I had to trim it down a bit because I was a little bit wordy in the whole thing. They said, "Man, you you're
Which
gonna have
is
to take out a couple of these
so
stories, because it's like an encyclopedia." And so I did, and at that point, I finally got the right version that I really liked. It was trimmed down, but I knew I had to go through that. It's pretty long the way it is anyway. I could easily have written another book, but my life is still going on. I'd like to write another one. You never know. But what was satisfying, it's just being able to put them all in just this big story about my life. And,
Mhm.
and a lot of people just couldn't even imagine the things that I've gone through.
Yeah.
And so putting them down and explaining them to people, even bouts with drugs here and there, and the trouble I used to get in when I was very young and all that,
Well,
and so, and being kicked out of my house at the age of 15 and
mhm.
living in a tent and all this. And I look back on it all and I think, God, I don't regret anything because it made me who I am today.
Yeah.
And here you go. You can either look at the things that have happened in the past and look at them negatively, or look at them positively and think of the growth that you've had
Mhm.
because of it, those different things. And so
Yeah.
that's the way I relate to it now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I suspect it was, I wonder if it was sort of like fun and nostalgic on one end, but
yeah,
it also means, looking back and kind of even, looking back at people who are no longer here. And
right. Oh, yeah.
was it kind of hard to kind of work through that? And or how did that process
Yeah.
feel doing that?
Well, that was like, especially my friend that passed away when I was like 12, 13. I think I was
Yeah.
13. And that really hit me hard. Writing that story, that was really difficult to do
Yeah.
because that was one that it really changed my life. Just the fact that he committed suicide at that age.
Yeah.
I think he was a year older than me, so he was probably 14, but
Yeah.
it's just tragic, and I didn't figure that out for years later because being 13, the cops or your parents aren't going to tell you, well, he hung himself. You know what I mean? They're not going to tell me that. And so, but I figured it out. That's exactly what happened. And so,
Yes.
and then I look at, there's so many of friends and family that have passed away, um, but that I didn't even mention in the book because there's
Yeah.
just so many that there was no reason to go into that whole morose thing. I think differently about death anyway, but just talking about, everybody that's died, I didn't want to do that. But I did mention a few notables that had to go in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, there were parts that were definitely sad in there.
Yeah.
And they brought back those memories. But I just went through it and I just wrote it like, this is what happened to my life. And it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. 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 We'll be putting links in the show notes for people.
Yeah,
Have
absolutely. Yeah.
information for
That's
checking
it.
out.
It's a fun ride. Book, it's called Confessions of a Rock Guitarist. It's a fun ride. I write it with humor because it was really funny while all this stuff was going on. It was tragedy and humor and all of what's in between
Yeah.
mixed into one book, so
Yes.
yeah.
Um, all right, let's pivot a little bit. A few questions. One question I want to ask is, what's one thing you wish someone had told you early on about the money side of the industry?
Write more songs.
Write more
I wish
songs.
somebody really had drilled that into my head. See, during my time, I was only interested in guitar playing, which, you know, obviously worked out in the end because that's what I'm mainly known for is my guitar work and, the different things that I've written and taught. And so if I would have put a lot more concentration into writing rather than just practicing guitar all the time, um, I think that monetarily I would have been in a much better place. Even though I'm doing fine now, I have these songs everywhere and stuff. So I'm still getting paid off of that, But I'm thinking I would have made a lot more if I would have just concentrated on writing for different movies and soundtracks and things like that. That money never goes away.
Yeah.
You keep on every time anybody runs the movie like Father Like Son, because we play live in that, I get money from that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Every time anybody watches it, even just on Netflix or something, I get paid for that every time. And plus all the songs that we have in different TV shows like Miami Vice and stuff like that. You get paid for that. You still get paid for all of it. And so that's why I wish that I would have just written more and tried to get more songs just in those different types of situations. So,
So what advice would you give a musician to have those kinds of things have besides more songs? But I mean, specifically, like what kind of arrangements are being made early on when
mhm,
this music is being created from the deal side or the contract side or whatever, so
mhm.
that they're getting that long-term residual from their own music rather than it
Right.
just
Well,
fading away.
getting the songs placed so that they're in, okay, like the you're either with BMI or ASCAP. Now, for movies and stuff like that, it's usually Universal Music Group. And so you get signed up with these, your agent can, we had a business manager back then. So all these things were placed in by him, but now you can do it yourself. You can go ahead and place these songs, register them with BMI, become a BMI member. Anybody can do that. Not anybody, but you have to be a songwriter and you basically have to have some level of success because BMI pays you through radio play. So you have to have a bit of that going on, you know what I mean? So it's step by step. But one of the things that you want to do is get registered with these companies anyway as soon as you can. And in that way, that sets up your whole royalty thing. Another one is sound exchange. Again, that's all these things that I'm mentioning, that's all when you're getting, they collect from different things like the movies and TVs and the commercials and all those kinds of things. So, but you have to have that out there first. But you have to, what I would say is check out as many basic things that you can as far as that, look up Sound Exchange, look up BMI to become a member, Universal Music Group, and Copyright Alliance, who has links to all these different things on there. I mean, everything from copywriting your song and on through, getting gigs and the best way to do this or that. It's very informative. So that's one of the things is really check out. I think it's just copyrightalliance.com. That's what it is.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. So for musicians coming in right now and trying to make ends meet right now, what's maybe one honest way to make money for them starting out?
Well, of course, playing gigs, right? You get paid for that. And selling merchandise, of course. That's another thing that I was going to say is the merchandise. When you have you're streaming different songs, that you've made and on video, having little places because everybody always asks, "Well, we're going to get a T-shirt from this band,"
Mhm.
and so then you have a link of different merch that people can buy straight through there. And merch companies, they do it. It's fairly cheap, and a lot of them they will even, they'll be your basic store for it, where there'll be a link to buy whatever merchandise you have directly through them, directly through a merchandise provider. And so you can do it that way, but that's an important way too, because then when you have people wearing their t-shirts going around, everybody goes, "Oh, what band is that?" And you go, "Oh, here's a link, go check them out. They're great." So you do that for your own band as well. So it really helps.
So looking back across everything, what's one business decision or financial decision you're most proud of?
Probably first of all, getting signed with RCA. That was like a huge one because none of the other things would have been possible if we wouldn't have signed that deal with RCA. You see, so that started the whole thing, and then it just kind of cascaded from there.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but
Yep.
like I said, you don't need a record company nowadays. You need a distribution company
Yep.
and you need a marketing company. And a lot of times you can set up payments with them, whatever it may be. If you don't have like 5 grand to do a marketing company, maybe if you're like a 5-piece band, it'd be 1,000 each, but
Mhm.
something like that, because everybody's going to benefit from it. But if you don't have that, a lot of them have things where you can pay them payments. So,
Yep.
because that makes it easier. But as far as making money, wow, it's like the merchandise and the playing clubs. But that's going to be difficult to make much money because a lot of these clubs they're only going to pay you 500 at the end of the day after you've went and played and all this your
Mhm.
gas expenses and this and that. It's not very much money.
I mean, that's
So
been a common conversation we've had with those doing live shows regularly. The
mhm.
single most advantageous thing mentioned by all of the artists has been
Uh,
merch as a
yeah,
supplement. Like
right.
every single person I talk to, they're like, get the merch out there. Don't show up to a show
Yeah.
without merch, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Got to
You
have
do
merch there, no doubt.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so we
that's
always
cool.
had a merch person, so I didn't have to worry about that, personally. But for bands that are wanting to do it on their own, another thing is that pay attention to what you research is, especially finding good formats where you can look at what they offer, like Copyright Alliance, and then it'll guide you to different sites and you can study them. But being knowledgeable about the whole business and how it all works,
Mhm.
that's very important because you can make a lot of mistakes on the way. As we discussed earlier, a lot has changed since the time when I started out to now. I mean, it's completely different, but there's some guidelines that you still have to follow.
Yep.
Like getting the marketing thing together, getting the merchandise. Sure, go out, play some shows, but basically really use the internet to its full advantage.
Mhm. Mhm. So, winding down, I think my last big question I want to know, what advice would you give the musician? We talk all the time about making the money, but what advice would you give the musician to keep the money they're making, one, or prepare for the future because you don't know how long you're going to be able to ride the wave?
Well, I would say individually for each individual person in the band, if you're starting to make some good money, put that money away, invest it if you wish. But and that's what a lot of musicians have done. There's musicians that have, like I say, for instance, Jefferson Airplane. Let's take them for an example. San Francisco-based band, but when they made their money, what they did, and Santana was another one, San Francisco-based band, where they started investing in apartments in the whole Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and elsewhere too, strip malls and stuff like that. And they're very rich from that.
Wow.
They would be out of money completely if they didn't make those type of investments.
Well, I
So
did not
that's
know
one thing to keep in mind. Yeah,
that.
is making investments where it's going to keep on making money.
Yeah.
You see.
Yeah.
So if you want to make the money, do the things that I've said as far as the songwriting goes, and trying to jump onto as many platforms as you can to get them heard and get your product sold. But then also when you start making that money, just don't go out and buy a Ferrari.
Right?
I've,
Come on.
I've had some nice cars, but I didn't buy a Ferrari. I just said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
But
is a common story.
yeah,
You make out
exactly.
money real fast and then you go
Oh,
and
yeah.
spend it
Yeah.
real fast thinking
And,
it's
and,
gonna
and I lived in LA while all this is going on. I see different bands that start up and they become pretty damn big. Like, oh God, what was the name of the band? The one that did My Sharona. And then I can't remember them, but I don't know. The band name is evading me right now. But anyway,
that
they
did my the knack.
the neck, yes,
Yeah.
there. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
But they were completely broke, except for I think there was like one or two members that might have invested when they got that big chunk. The ones that didn't, they're completely broke. So that's one thing to really look at is look at investments also. You see, nowadays you kind of have to be, and back then you kind of had to be a businessman and not just think, oh, you're going to be rich forever. No, because maybe your first album does great, but maybe your second album does not do so well.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? I mean, we sold about 5 million internationally. 5 to 7 million is the total. It's hard to get an exact number,
Mhm.
but that was internationally. You know what I mean? So it wasn't just here in America. And that was off of 3 albums, not one album. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
So you have to look at that. And luckily, we're in a lot of, like I said before, TVs, movies, and we still got a lot of radio play. So that really helps tremendously.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there's so much. I think we talk about trying to keep the money you're making and
mhm.
investing it in something that's going to keep you
Right,
going and playing for the future because you don't know what the future holds. And
that's right,
uh,
exactly.
there's
Yeah,
no, that's one of the things I'm constantly talking to musicians about is kind of what are we going to do for down the road? Yes, we want to hope
yeah,
that we're going to keep going and keep making it and keep selling well, like whatever. But
right.
you need to plan rationally for the future in case it doesn't go according to plan.
Right,
Or
exactly. And that's the thing is you speak of like going out and playing live. Sure, that's immediate money right there.
yeah,
But that usually and selling merch while you're doing this. But what most people you probably talk to are fairly well established that are doing this, correct?
I mean, all walks of life. I mean, getting started
Okay.
out, who have their day job still, and
Right, right,
we're prepping anyway, because,
right, exactly. But
it
that's what
is.
you have to look at. It's a tough business to make a living in it. There's no doubt about that. And that's what I tell my students all the time. Do this because you love it,
Yeah.
because that's the main thing. And be yourself with it and have fun with it. It's not always about becoming a star, but really kind of appeasing yourself and doing
Mhm,
something that you really love.
mhm.
So it's more about that. But if you do want to continue an income from it, then you're going to have to make some investments off the
Yep,
initial money that you do make. You
yep,
know what I
yeah.
mean? So,
Well, I applaud you in the decades in the industry, and you're
mhm.
pivoting and you're following your passions at the time and being willing to risk those pivots, from it's time to walk away for now and pursue this other thing. And now I'm going to do this. And it seems like you
Yeah,
had a good eye for that in your own world, but doing what you need to do for you.
right.
And
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And having fun at it. There's a lot of things I like to do. I like to go out in nature a lot, and I'd like to read, and I'd like to just study different things. And
yeah,
I have this inquisitive mind where I'm always looking at
yeah,
different things.
yeah,
And writing and going into a completely different direction is one of those things.
yep.
So, you
Cool.
know,
All right, Steve. So we close every episode with what we call final riffs, just rapid fire questions, rapid
uh,
fire answers. And let's dive in. You ready?
sure.
All right. So I want to ask, funniest thing that's ever happened on stage?
Yes, that was in Washington, D.C. They had these cameras up on all over the whole Coliseum that we were playing at. And what happened was my pants, custom made pants, they'd they'd split apart in the front. And I didn't know it because I was just running around on stage. And I had my guitar in front of me.
Oh, no.
But then there were people in front of me that were pointing at me and laughing. And they'll go, "Oh my God, what are they laughing at? What's the big deal?" And then I kind of had my guitar to the side and I looked up at one of the screens and there it was. I mean, I was
Nice.
just hanging out. Oh, wow. Put my guitar back in front of me
Nice
real
guitar
quick
there.
and try to get back behind my amps and rearrange everything as quickly as possible.
Shoot.
And so I made it through the rest of the show, but that was the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me on
That's for
stage.
sure.
So
That's for sure. All right. If you could share the stage with anyone alive or gone, who would it be?
I think that would probably be David Gilmour.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, or Jimmy Page. I'm old school, I grew up with the 60s and 70s
Yeah.
music, so,
Yeah.
uh,
All right. One city or venue you will never forget playing in.
oh, Madison Square Gardens.
Yeah.
That was like the biggie. You played Madison Square Gardens and you've made it, you know what I mean? And so we played there quite a few times, and it was always just, wow, incredible to be there. And that's where we got signed with RCA, so of course it's gonna be favorite place.
Pretty big deal place for you.
Yeah,
First concert you ever went to?
Jimi Hendrix when I was
Hendrix.
12. Yeah, I was 12 and I snuck into the Coliseum in Seattle and I watched him perform, and it just completely blew me away.
Yeah.
And that's when that whole thing about just being super into Hendrix, that's when that really, I didn't want to play bass, I wanted to play guitar.
If you weren't doing music, what would you be doing? If music were not on the field.
Um, Boy, I would have to be doing something creative. I think I would be writing books.
Okay.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
different things that I've studied.
Uh-huh.
And like I started studying this stuff back in the late 60s. I mean, I was so young that I had to have a dictionary beside me. You know what I mean? Because I
Mhm.
didn't understand a lot of the stuff that I was reading. But
Yeah.
it's what gave me an education because I'm an eighth grade dropout. So that's how I got my education was on my own. So I would definitely say, being a writer.
There you go.
So
There you
yeah.
go. Good. All right, Steve, this has been a fantastic conversation. Nearly 50 years of the music, pioneering technique, major label run, school, a memoir, and a brand new chapter moving
Mhm.
forward. There's not too many people, I think, that have navigated this industry with that kind of range and lived to tell the story honestly.
Yeah.
Guys, go pick up Confessions of a Rock Guitarist. We'll have links in the show notes for you. It is out now via Indigo River Publishing and available wherever
Mhm.
books are sold. We will have, again, all the links in the show notes. And If today's conversation got you thinking about your own financial picture, the mistakes, the lessons, what would you do differently? That's exactly why I'm here. Head on over to 1024wealth.com/music, grab the free guide, schedule a call with me. Let's build a financial system for you that actually works the way music and musicians live and work. Steve, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
I
you, Jason.
appreciate it. It's been fun having you. And I think people that get through this will have learned a lot and walked away with a lot. I hope everybody was
Good.
taking
I hope so too.
I hope everybody was taking notes.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm Jason K. Powers. This is Backstage Money, where music and money collide, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks again, Steve.
All right. Peace out.